One of the things I actually really liked about the new Superman movie was the part where the army of monkeys were typing out all the hate comments. This is the kind of satire that James Gunn is really good at. Like, he's just nailing it. And looking at some of the comments I got from my most recent videos, I feel like satire is dead. You do know that James Gunn is making fun of you, right? Okay, time to address these allegations. No, I'm not a Snyder cultist. I enjoy a lot of James Gunn's work. I've enjoyed the first couple of Guardians movies. I liked Suicide Squad, Scooby-Doo, masterpiece. But I don't know, I just haven't really been enjoying his new DC stuff. He's really good at satirizing and deconstructing superhero tropes and cliches, but that's just not really what I want to see in a Superman movie. As for Zack Snyder, it's not really my favourite version of Superman, but at the very least I think he understands the mythology and the thematic importance of Superman as a refugee. It's fine to have different versions of Superman by different artists, each version has its own strengths or weaknesses, but I'm not going to pretend that I thought that James Gunn's version was perfect just because you're Team Gunn. There are no teams. James Gunn and Zack Snyder are friends and neither of them care what you think. They're making Hollywood movies, and we're on the internet. Okay, that's enough with the insane comments. I'm just going to be focusing on people who actually had something to say now. This comment is from Loud Opinions. I don't believe that the message is hateful at all. I can see why you took it that way, but there's more to immigrant stories than heritage. This story is pro-immigrant being human, with almost a direct analogy to immigrants not being recognized as Americans. Many immigrants don't feel strongly connected to their culture and or want to disconnect themselves from their culture specifically because of their family. Not to say that your feelings are invalid, but that the immigrant experience doesn't need to be portrayed that way to be overall positive, because at the end, the immigrant is accepted. And for the immigrant who feels they're American, or really anywhere else, before they're wherever their parents came from, that can be important to be validated. It's a different story with a different message, and that's intentional, and it's fine. Okay, first off, I just want to say this was a really insightful comment. I actually agree with a lot of what you said here, and well done for picking up on the human analogy. You'd be surprised how many people just completely missed that. I definitely think that that's what James Gunn was going for. And you're right, there are lots of different types of immigrants and lots of different types of immigrant stories. Many immigrants have many different complicated feelings about their country of origin. Some of them, as you say, don't feel connected with their country of origin and they want to disconnect from it, and that's valid. But Superman is a very specific immigrant story because Superman is proud of his heritage. And the reason why it's so important that Superman is proud of his heritage is because the people of Earth accept him as a representation of the best of both Earth and Krypton. The message is be proud of who you are and where you come from, because there's a place for you in your new home. The immigrant is accepted, and the culture they bring with them is also accepted. Now, some writers challenge Superman with these remnants of Krypton's past that come back to haunt him, to challenge his perception of what Krypton was. That's not a new phenomenon. That's what General Zod is. He represents the evil of Krypton. And it makes the metaphor more nuanced, because we know that Krypton wasn't perfect. So Superman is representing the good of Krypton. But it only works because we know that Jor-El was good. As long as Jor-El symbolizes the good of Krypton, we know that there was something good about Krypton worth being proud of. Something for Superman to be proud of. Now, I get what you're saying. It's important to validate the feelings of immigrants who feel no connection with their homeland. But the problem is, that's not what Superman represents. His connection with Krypton is so strong that he wears the Kryptonian symbol for hope on his chest, and the blanket he was found in on his back. And in the film, there is no good reason why Superman is still wearing those Kryptonian symbols. Because as far as he knows, there was nothing good about Krypton worth being proud of. At the very least, the movie doesn't give us something for Superman to be proud of. Jor-El's beliefs are basically the same as General Zod. Krypton may as well be pure evil. All the nuance is gone. It's mixing metaphors. It's trying to turn the Superman mythos into a story that James Gunn is more comfortable telling, and it ends up coming across as insensitive. I understand what you mean. It's important to represent immigrants who want to renounce their homeland, but I think it's even more important to represent immigrants who are proud of where they come from, because right now, they are the ones who are being the most marginalized. But yeah, like, I get what you mean. I just think the Superman mythos is important, and I want to see it done right. But yeah, no, I mean, really insightful comment. You've brought up a lot of really interesting points, and I'm glad you enjoyed the movie. Storm says, I think the message James Gunn is going for is that no matter your past, fate/destiny/mission, you can still turn around and be good, more or less. Everything you said about Superman and his parents is true, and I agree with you, but I also think that the other route can work too. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with this. I don't have a problem with this type of story in isolation. Like, I used the example of Invincible. I think that's a really good example of using the Superman archetype to tell this kind of story. I just have a problem that they're doing it with Superman. He comes with all this baggage, so it feels a little insensitive to try and change it like this. I don't know, it didn't really work for me. Red Wolf says, guys, it's not a mess up, it's a try something new. I mean, for years, we've had the same story of Superman. Don't you think they want to add something new? Even if his parents weren't good, at least he's trying to be a good person. Yeah, I mean, in theory, I don't have any problem with trying to do something new with Superman, but at the same time, I feel that there are certain aspects to the character and the mythos that you need to keep the same in order for it to be recognizably Superman. Like, as I say, I don't have a problem with this kind of story in isolation. I just have a problem with they're doing it with Superman. If you want to tell this kind of story, I really feel that Superman is the wrong character to be doing it with because of all of this history and associations. It ends up mixing the metaphor. It makes it say something inadvertently that it never intended to say. It would be a bit like having Batman's parents still be alive. At a certain point, you're changing the mythos so much that it almost makes you wonder, why are you not just telling a different story with a different character? MK Serkal says, I think you completely missed the point of the movie. It was never about Superman's heritage. His past and his world are not the key here, but what Superman decides to do after learning that it is. Like the original title of the movie explained that this is more about the legacy Superman leaves on people, how he chooses to be with the powers of a god because he believes that life is beautiful and worth defending. I don't believe this idea that this somehow does not make for a good Superman story when the core message is about hope, when the world turns against you, when even your identity is on the line. I also disagree about this being a copy of Invincible, since the show touches on more the relationships we have with our parents and how to break the cycle of abuse, to be a better person for everyone. In fact, I would say Superman is more of a direct comparison to Megamind, where it doesn't matter what his parents' message was, it's what he decides to be, nature versus nurture. But that's just my opinion. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't even think about Megamind. That's a really great comparison. I think you're right about it not necessarily being a copy of Invincible, but it's definitely inspired by a more deconstructionist take on Superman. And you're right, it is about hope, but Superman's culture and his heritage are also important to him. Anyway, that's just my feelings on it. Thanks for sharing though. No Egrets says, I love this movie. The twist with his birth parents was not my favourite part, but I do enjoy the emphasis being put on his Earth parents. That was important to me and I think he nailed it. I love how they're just good folks with good heart. Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree there. I'm a big fan of the Kents' characters. I think they're portrayed very well. I just don't think that a positive portrayal of the Kents had to come at the expense of Superman's birth parents, you know? There's this great moment in Zack Snyder's Justice League where just after Superman comes back from the dead, he sort of hears the voices from both of his fathers, his Earth father and his Kryptonian father. And it's this really effective scene because you can kind of feel the love that he feels from both sets of his parents, and it's just a really sweet moment where you see both of his heritages coming together. As I said, Zack Snyder's Superman has its problems, but that moment, I really liked that. Billy says, I understand what you mean. However, we live in a time when people lose empathy for people from other countries, so I presume James Gunn chose his vision in order to make us feel connected to Superman on what we choose to be and not from where we come from. Yeah, I mean, probably, but I don't think that just because people are losing empathy for people from other countries, that means you have to change Superman. If you don't want to tell that kind of story with Superman, maybe you just shouldn't be telling a Superman story. Or at the very least, make a movie that's about other aspects of the character. There is more to him than his Kryptonian heritage. But if you're going to address his Kryptonian heritage, I don't think that this is necessarily the right way to do it. but that's just my thoughts. Actual Water says, bro, finally somebody who agrees. I watched this movie with high expectations and just walked out of the theater confused and disappointed. This is literally the first video I have seen not glazing on the movie. Yeah, no, this is why I made the original video. I remembered looking online and everyone really loved the movie and they weren't addressing the serious problems that I noticed with it. That's aside from the Snyder cultists who are just hating on everything about the movie and it's just not very interesting criticism. So I wanted to make a video that addressed those problems because I knew that there were other people out there who probably felt the same way I did. You know, like, your feelings are valid and I'm glad you enjoyed the video. Zach Morley says, the whole bit of Ultraman secretly being a Superman clone, but more like Bizarro than the actual Ultraman, is actually taken from The Boys, where, spoiler alert, Black Noir is actually an even more evil clone of Homelander. So Gunn's Superman is inspired by two deconstructionist takes on the genre. Ironic that it's Superman to which it's now being applied. Brings it all full circle. Yeah, I mean, could not agree more. As I said earlier, James Gunn is really good at deconstruction and satire. But Superman doesn't need to be deconstructed. But yeah, James Gunn is taking a very deconstructionist angle on Superman. And I don't think that's necessarily the right way to approach this character, who is quite simple, really. He's quite uncomplicated. And I think that's part of the appeal. I don't know, it didn't really work for me. Look, I only made the first video because I have very strong feelings about Superman. He's my favorite superhero, and I want to see it done right. But I also think that Superman represents something important. If you enjoyed the movie, that's totally okay. But I think my argument is valid. When someone like James Gunn is given the rare opportunity to make a Superman movie, that comes with great responsibility to adhere to what the character represents. I don't think that James Gunn is a bad person for making this film, but I do think that making this Superman story in this political climate was insensitive and potentially harmful. And I think that that's worth talking about. It kind of ruined the movie for me. But if you still enjoyed it, I'm happy for you.